Good evening, friends. Here we are to continue our wonderful experience with Divine Friendship with Swami Kriyananda. We'll have a prayer, then a little chanting with Keshava. Oops, I'm making a big mess over here, but we will sort it out.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about the book. So let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, humbly we bow to you all. Dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, inspire us with the deep inspiration behind your words. Help us to feel your thoughts, and with your thoughts your uplifting vibration, and with your vibration your deep love. Your love for us, your love for Master, your love for God in all. Help us to walk in your footsteps and to arrive as you have arrived at perfect freedom in God. Om. Peace. Amen.
Oh. Sorry for the clicking. I want only thee, Lord, thee, only thee. 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 years or till tomorrow. In the valley of sorrow, 1,000 years or till tomorrow. But I'll wait to see only you, just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you. My heart's aflame, my soul's afire. My heart's aflame, my soul's afire. Just for just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you. In the valley of sorrow, 1,000 years or till tomorrow. In the valley of sorrow, 1,000 years or till tomorrow. But I'll wait to see only just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you. My heart's aflame, my soul's afire. My heart's aflame, my soul's afire. Just for just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you.
Peace. Amen. Well, friends, here we are. We have just started into a new section of our book, and this section is called Strong Medicine. Because the first letter was long, last week when I was speaking, I gave a long introduction to what the context of this letter was. As it happened last weekend, last week here was also the week of the presidential debate. And as a consequence, a lot of you missed my talk. I just decided every 4 years event superseded me, but so be it. But so I will have to summarize what I said. I also want to not forget that for those of you watching in real time, there won't be a class next week. I'm going to be doing a program for Ananda, Los Angeles about spiritual community. Exactly the same time frame, so I'm not quite sure how you get onto that class, but I'm sure it's not hard to find. Ananda, LA. So not here, but I'll be speaking, but not in this stream. So this letter is the context to a devotee wanting to start a theater festival at Ananda Village based on the offerings of the world religions. So that seems like a fairly far out thing to suggest, except in the context, Swami had just published his book, The Hindu Way of Awakening. And what that book, and I talked much more about the history of that book, which is not necessary for this letter. The premise of that book was that there are two aspects to every world religion. One is the way of belief, and the other is the way of awakening. On the way of belief, the religions move side by side, but they don't intersect. We believe in Jesus, we believe in puja, we don't believe in God at all because we're Buddhists and we think that Buddha didn't talk about God. We're Islam and this is our story. We're Jewish, we don't believe in Christ. You have all these different beliefs that are just sort of running all around, and people can be gracious to each other, people can be respectful of each other, but on the way of belief, it's utterly irreconcilable. On the way of awakening, which is to say, what happens to a devotee when he or she devotes himself to the effort to come closer to God, however he defines that, whatever path he walks, the signs and the experience of awakening is when all the religions come together. And it comes together in the metaphysics of it, because the energy interiorizes, the energy intensifies, the energy elevates, the heart becomes compassionate, the view of the world shifts from fragmentation into unity. We experience God as love, as peace, as joy. All the differences in the way of belief are dissolved in the way of awakening, which is why the great masters, no matter what their origin point is, all speak the same language, because they all recognize that however you got here, we've arrived at the same mountain. So in that context, someone in the community became very enthusiastic about what he perceived to be the unity of all religions, and then came up with this idea, let's have a theater festival and we'll invite all the different religious groups to come and bring plays about their particular spiritual point of view, and then we'll have this big festival and it'll unite all religions. Swami was less than enthusiastic about it. And he fundamentally writes, as you'll see, that the author of that letter was guilty of what Patanjali calls missing the point. It's actually one of Patanjali's warnings in one of his sutras that one of the things that can happen to us on the path is that we completely miss the point. And I've always been amused that Sanskrit could translate into missing the point. And it's a very subtle concept, where you have an idea that seems like it's really good, except it's just parallel. It's just enough off that it completely misses what you're supposed to be doing. And this is a classic example. So Swami writes to this person, this is October 1998. Thank you for writing. You've told me about a new idea, but haven't asked for feedback. I should also add that the author of this letter and Swamiji were in a period of time in which they didn't see eye to eye on a great many things. And it was sort of, this was like, it was a karmic cycle of parallel universes that didn't intersect. Eventually, many years later, there's been a complete reconciliation. It was not like it was antagonistic. It was just there was a definite lack of attunement. There was a lack of understanding from the devotee's part about what Swami was really all about at that time. Thank you for writing. You've told me about a new idea, but haven't asked for feedback. I'm therefore a bit shy about giving any. Still, I suppose a letter gets written in at least the hope of a response. So here goes. So that was Swami's first comment, which is, you've presented this idea as a great idea for all of Ananda. You've presented it to me as if I were the leader of Ananda. But the way you phrased the letter, you haven't actually asked what I think or whether I approve of the idea. You've just announced to me that you're enthusiastic about doing it. The enthusiasm you express for this new idea tends to crowd actual realities into the background. I mean, that sentence, I read that sentence a year ago when I picked up this book for no particular, the context didn't matter. I happened to be in Mumbai, India, and I pulled it off the bookshelf. The enthusiasm you express for this new idea tends to crowd actual realities into the background. I have been through many times, both emanating from me and emanating from others, exactly what he encapsulates in that sentence there, that I or someone else becomes so enthusiastic about what a beautiful idea this is, that in all the energy that we ourselves are generating, we don't notice that it doesn't really match the situation. And we get confused about positive thinking and affirmative thinking and visualizing the result and actual realities. For the most part, speaking of myself, I have a fairly good instinct for which ideas really have enough behind them to actually succeed. And this is where I've often been in trouble, is because even though I fall prey to this, I'm not as prone to it as other people I know. Or let me say, I rarely fall prone to it, and when I do, it tends to be temporary. Because I can sort of feel whether an idea has enough traction to really make it happen. And I've been often in situations where people are so enthusiastic that if you try to quell that enthusiasm, you feel like you're not really being helpful. But that enthusiasm pushes into the background actual realities. Who's going to do it? How many people are interested? Whether or not it's timely? Is there money to support it? Now, Swamiji has also warned me personally about being too negative and being too, as he put it, and I'll put it exactly as he put it, too factual about things. And I've also watched Swamiji just allow people to go forward with their enthusiasm because they'll learn. How else will people learn? People won't learn by you saying, no, that's not going to work. They learn from finding out whether it's going to work. And one of the reasons I've learned to be able to often tell whether we have the energy to carry it off or not is because I've tried to carry off ideas where the energy wasn't there. And I found the results of it. And, of course, sometimes people surprise you. So you have to give that a lot of space. However, in this case, Swamiji is giving very specific advice to this person about this idea. The enthusiasm you express, so what I'm saying here, what the point I'm trying to say is, be careful. When you become enthusiastic about something, enthusiasm alone isn't enough. And here's that Swami's phrase, you have to be practical in your idealism, which is a really fundamental principle of Ananda. Swami was as expansive in his thinking as anybody could be, but he was also very practical in his idealism. And he was practical also in the sense of, even if we don't quite succeed, let's see how far we can get before we have to give it up. So there's lots of different ways to go at it. The enthusiasm you express for this new idea tends to crowd actual realities into the background. I am grateful for your enthusiasm and recognize it as a great asset, both to yourself and to others. Still, I must be truthful and say that I don't share it for this particular project for the following reason. What you are speaking of promoting in theater pieces what you speak of promoting is theater pieces not on the way of awakening, but on the way of belief, the very thing that separates religions rather than drawing them together. Have you read my book, The Hindu Way of Awakening? Although Swami didn't write that sarcastically. Have you read my book, The Hindu Way of Awakening? It is just the eclectic mixture you've favored that I've tried to correct and bring to a deeper level of understanding. Swami talked about various ecumenical programs that he was involved in. He spoke of one that he was involved in India where he was there and there was a Catholic priest, I believe he was Catholic, and he said when the Catholic stood up, he said, "Oh, I'm so honored." And the whole thing was about the unity of religions. And the man stood up and said, "Oh, I'm so honored to be invited to speak of my beloved Lord Jesus." Which Swami thought, for himself, for the priest, that was a wonderful attitude to have. But we were at a point where we were all supposed to be talking about the unity behind our teachings, not about what separated us. He talked about another occasion where there was a very social activist Christian, and that man was essentially excoriating everyone who wasn't on the street trying to help the underprivileged and pick up the impoverished and change the social system, and that we weren't really devotees of God unless we were doing that. And Swami, in such a setting, would rarely contradict another speaker, but he stood up and he basically said, I will not allow you to define for me what it means to serve God. I reserve that right for myself. You may choose your path, but you have no right to tell me what mine must be. And then in the previous one, where the man had spoken of my Lord Jesus Christ, Swamiji spoke about, in his way, about the unifying principle behind all religions, which was the way of awakening. And afterwards, several people, commended him for speaking about the unity of religion. And Swami said, he accepted, but he thought to himself, but that's why we were here. We were supposed to talk about the unity of religion. Why should that be special? But in the context it was, which is why Swamiji put forward this idea. The way of belief, we can respect each other. We cannot be bigoted against each other. We can tolerate each other. We can be friends. But we're always going to feel that we're in separate camps. I mean, Jews do not accept Christ. Buddhists do not accept the idea of God, even like that. Christians don't accept that there's any way besides Jesus. So we be nice to each other, but where do we find the unity? Master said self-realization is the unifying principle. So Swami very carefully worked out this way of awakening so that there could be an actual understanding of why we're all the same, instead of just a polite agreement to not be rude to each other. So he points out to him that what this idea suggests is not only not effective, it is the opposite of what Swami had in mind. So, but the thing goes deeper, Swami writes, after he's saying, what you favored is exactly what I've tried to correct, but the thing goes deeper. To invite churches or other religious groups to present their ideas in this vitally important manner, when they haven't even begun to absorb the unity underlying those ideas, is to court confusion of the worst kind. So what he's saying is, nobody understands it. Even you, who are living right in this community, don't understand what I'm saying. Do you think that some parish priest or some minister over here or some imam or rabbi is going to capture the subtlety of what I, on behalf of Master, am trying to put across? There's such a thing. It's just not time yet. We have to inspire people first with these ideas. And it's to court confusion of the worst kind, Swami says. The potential problems would be limited by the fact that few, if any, would be ready to participate meaningfully in such a project, new to them as it would be. This is where Swami says your enthusiasm is crowding out actual realities. What other religious group is going to actually mount a theater production to come to a unity of religion event based on your theater production? The few, if any, would be ready to participate in such a project, but even so, it would put us out there as backing what was really almost the opposite of what I've tried to do through the book. He said eclecticism, not unity. So that's the very important word. Eclecticism, well, this one is good, and this one is good, and this one is good, and there's a little from here. And that's what you see, and it's a step in the right direction. Bear in mind, the ecumenical movement and even the eclectic unity of many different paths, where people come together and actually support each other. This is a very valid principle. In our temple in Palo Alto, we have symbols of all the world religions. At Master's Lake Shrine, he has symbols of all the world religions. At the Temple of Light in Ananda Village, we have symbols of all the world religions, and we invited for the dedication representatives of all those religions, to offer some cogent principle that represents that truth. It's not as if we stand against that truth by any means. It's a huge step in the direction that we're trying to go. And that kind of respectful appreciation that there are many different paths and they all have valid points and sincere devotees, and we can band together for our own good. All of that is very positive, but it's the groundwork for something much deeper. I was remembering here, let me see where I am in this. I can go for this. A number of years ago, I had a very strange experience right here in town here. there was this woman who called me, and she was an officer in the California Atheist Society. And they were having this big event, and she really wanted me to come as a representative of, I don't know whatever she called me, she wanted me to come. And they were having a special guest, and this special guest was the state chairman of the California Atheist Society was going to be there, and this other man who is an attorney who has been suing the U.S. government to get the words "God We Trust" taken off the dollar bill. And I didn't want to go, but she kept calling me, and at one point I finally decided, okay, I'll go. There was going to be some kind of a panel of different spiritual groups. Now, in retrospect, it's like, what was I thinking? I have no idea. But she just persevered, so I finally said yes. I didn't invite anybody else to come because by the time I was going, I didn't think it was anything anyone would want to be at. So I go to this event, and, it's beyond me at this point to imagine what we were why they invited us, because we were all sort of up there together. There was an Episcopal priest, there may have been somebody Jewish, there was me, there was a fundamentalist Christian, there may have been one other person, and we each gave a little statement of something or another. I think I tried to universalize the search for happiness and the desire to escape suffering or something like that. The state chairman of the Atheist Society was like somebody had called central casting and said, we need a state chairman of the California Atheist Society. And so this man came. He was a little bit thin, kind of that bony kind of thinness that's just a little, that he doesn't look fit. He just looks a little gaunt. And he was dressed all in black, of course. And I don't know if he darkened his eyebrows, but he actually dyed his hair. So his hair was this, it was like it was goth rather than atheist, or maybe it's all the same. And it was this jet black, and it was sort of longish and, actually like a little stringy, just what you would expect the president of the Atheist Society to look like, in all his mannerisms and the sound of his voice and his incredible ego. He was here I am, the president of the California Atheist Society, eat your hearts out because you're not me. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And he was so dark, and he was so, I think evil is the only word I can think of. He was really evil. I'm sitting next to the fundamentalist Christian guy, and again, the details are obscure to me because we were sitting in the front of everyone, and we were sort of interacting. It was nuts. But the more this happened, the more he and I leaned into each other. And, just like we began to huddle, because even, I don't think a rabbi was there, but whoever and I don't mean to cast aspersions, but the Episcopal was so busy, the other people were so busy being liberal and accepting of everyone, they didn't seem to realize that we were in the presence of the dark force. We were really in the presence of the dark force. The only guy who knew it was the Christian guy and me. And we were we were whispering to each other, we found we were in Hades with what was going on there. And and then the man who's suing the U.S. government stood up, and if it were possible to be more egoic than the president of the society, this man had it. And he was just, riffing off of all the great things he was doing to get God even farther removed from our society. And wasn't that really a great thing? And, the Christian guy and I are huddling closer and closer together. And I said to him, honestly, I said, in other circumstances, you and I would be on opposite sides of the question. But when we're in the presence of the real enemy, which is this incredible materialistic nihilism, rejection of all higher realities, I said, all our differences are absolutely trivial. And he totally agreed with me. And I actually kept in touch with him for a time. He was a very nice man. But from that experience, it became vividly clear to me, what's really happening. And that may be, in fact, the way in which the unity of religion begins to come about. If our society keeps going in some of the ways it's going, true devotees of God, however they get there, are going to begin to recognize that there is light and there is darkness. And the shade, the nuances of the color of our light is so insignificant compared to the darkness. When Swamiji was trying to talk to the Bishop of Assisi, the Catholic Bishop of Assisi, because we've been there in Assisi now for 20 or 30 years. This was 20 years ago, but the word of our self-realization enclave, which is a little outside the town of Assisi, and our retreat and so on. We advertise our retreat globally, and we invite people to come and experience the blessings of the land of St. Francis and the power of St. Clare and all of that. And I mean, many Catholic priests recognize us as kindred spirits and love us. But at that time, at least, the bishop was very conservative, and he did not love us. And an article actually came out in a Catholic journal in which we were named. Ananda was named, and we were chastised for daring to claim in any way the blessings, the Catholic blessings of St. Francis, as Hindu yogis, that we could imagine that St. Francis would bless us. It was just the height of chutzpah, although they didn't use that word. Anyway, so Swami called up the bishop and went to speak to him, and got absolutely nowhere. He couldn't get anywhere with the man. And finally, at the end, Swamiji said, well, at least we can agree that there is a real enemy out there, and it's not either of our groups. Meaning that we have more in common than the differences between us when you compare us to the rampant atheism that's really taking over society. And on that point, at least, the priest could agree that the real enemy is something else entirely. Still, we will be stronger as spiritual people if we have a deeply grounded sense of our unity rather than a mere intellectual, broad-minded tolerance. So, Swami goes on to say, we're talking of something deep here, not theater, not showmanship, not involving crowds of people, not widespread publicity. The idea of a festival is not only premature, but not the right approach at all to this very serious subject. If my book were to begin its journey into people's minds on this level, it would dampen its potential for reaching the serious audience for whom it is intended. It's also an interesting point how Swami sees his books. And he sees them, Swamiji is I hope he's not more than one generation ahead of his time, but he is at least a generation ahead of his time. When Buckminster Fuller who was also a visionary, a future visionary of a very large order, he was being interviewed toward the end of his life, and the interviewer said, "Are you discouraged that so few of your ideas have been accepted?" And Buckminster, who is a very charming, childlike spirit, said, "Not at all, not at all." He says it always takes at least a generation, usually at least two, before new ideas are accepted. That's just the way it is. Because, there's a momentum, there's a committed group. And truthfully, even scientists have said this. Scientific innovation happens when the old guard dies and the new generation grows up with a different perspective. So a lot of people have to die. This morning, I was talking about institutionalism in religion, and I was just speaking of it, and someone who was in the room who's a millennial, completely different reality than mine. And what Swami wrote was written in 1983, which is already, 40 years ago. And she said, my millennial said to me, "But there's such an emphasis on the individual. People don't trust institutions." And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? I said, not now, but even 25 years ago, that wasn't true. And of course, there's more to say about institutions and religions because it's a whole different subject. It's on my morning broadcast from yesterday and today, from today and tomorrow. You'll hear it too. But it was just interesting. It's like already, you see, she's growing up as a different generation. And what was true for even people who are 20 years older than her, where institutional religion was a very strong force, Already she's growing up when it's been so profoundly weakened that it doesn't even cross her mind that it's an issue. Now, I don't think that was a definitive answer by any means, but it was an interesting response. And that's what Swami's talking about. This book has a serious job to do, and it's going to take time for it really, what will happen, you see, is that people will, as Dwapara Yuga rises, people will intuitively know that there's a unity here. But they will be, this is me explaining what I think will happen, they'll intuitively know that somehow we all must be doing the same thing because we'll feel the energy of it. You see, in Kali Yuga, everything is fixed and rigid, and that's where all the differences come from. If I'm Jewish, I can't be Christian. If I'm Christian, I can't be Muslim. If I'm Muslim, I can't be Buddhist. If I'm Buddhist, I can't be Hindu, because each of them looks like it's a rigid thing. When we get it more into Dwapara, what we begin to feel is the energy. So at that moment when I was with that Christian at the atheist conference, the form of our devotion to God was completely washed away because we felt that we were the same. We could just feel that we were the same, and we knew it. And we clung to each other because of that. As Dwapara Yuga rises, the unity of things will be more obvious, but people will need ideas. They will need to understand, how can that be true? If Jesus Christ is my only Savior and you don't even believe in the Messiah, how can that be? How can it be the same? So then, at that time, Swamiji's book will begin to find its way. And it will just begin, it will be discovered, it'll be vibrationally in tune with what people are looking for at that time. Swamiji's comment, many of you have heard me say it before, when the teenagers in our community wanted him to hear the music of Michael Jackson when Michael was at the peak of his success, before he got the other side of success, the other side of all that popularity, meaning the opposite. But when Swami listened to a few of the Michael Jackson cuts which the young people gave to him, he was honest enough and fair-minded enough to use these words. He's a consummate artist. He says he knows exactly what he wants to say, and he says it perfectly, which is true. That's why he was so successful. Then Swami added, and his vibration, he's completely in tune with the times. And that's why everyone in the world liked him, because the vibration of consciousness that he was presenting was the mass vibration of consciousness. He articulated it musically perfectly, and everybody, millions of people around the world resonated with it all over the planet. And Swami's comment was, it really showed him how completely out of tune Swamiji was with the vibration of this planet, and how he essentially said he didn't want to be in tune with the vibration of this planet. What an awful thing that would be. He's for the future. There's a small group of people compared to the planet who recognize him. I mean, he's extremely well respected. His books are in 100 countries and 30 languages. It's not like he's obscure, but he's not popular in the way that people are who are in tune with this reality. But he's planted the seed. And so that when the time comes, and also you have to understand the way the cosmic drama works. Things begin on the causal, they move through the astral, and they finally manifest on the material, but they don't start on the material plane. So there's this causal energy moving through the astral that is talking about the true unity of all religions. But it takes time. It takes time for magnetism to grow. It takes time for people to awaken to it. In this particular case, it's going to take time for the yuga, the energy of the yuga, to rise, so that the souls who are drawn here have the elevated consciousness to see what Swami's doing. And then when that time comes, it'll emerge, because suddenly Swami's book, he won't be here in person, but his consciousness will be here. Swami's ideas and his vibration will be in tune with the planet at that point. And part of what will make the planet in tune with his ideas is that it's already planted in the ether and it's already moving through the causal and the material. So again, Swami's saying to this person, to just throw this thing up when there's no context for it, and it will actually reinforce the wrong ideas. Why would we do this? We're missing the point. Just to have a lot of religions come together and say each other are nice is not at all what he was trying to say. So he says, the essential unity of religions is close to my heart too, because this man had talked about his love for that concept. But what you've proposed would not further that unity. It would only, if it worked, which in fact I doubt it would, fan people's curiosity and eagerness for intellectual knowledge. That's how, see, ecumenicalism tends to express. Oh, what do you believe? Oh, that's very interesting. So this is what these people believe, and this is what these people believe. It's not based on a shared experience. The way of awakening is an actual experience in which the vibrations, we recognize that the vibrations are the same because we're all in touch with the same reality, the same greater reality. To just talk about our different beliefs just keeps us in the intellect. So, Swami concludes, no, I don't like the idea. That much said, I'm still grateful for your enthusiasm and therefore hesitate to say anything to squelch it. But I must be truthful, and the truth is that such a festival just wouldn't have my endorsement. And then Swami signs it in Master's love. So of course it never went anywhere. But it's a very interesting, interesting letter for the subject. But it's also an interesting letter in the necessity to think deeply about things. This is something that I'm so grateful for Swamiji, and sometimes I worry a little bit because we all just get caught up in fads. We get caught up in the energy of the moment. We get caught up in what's popular. We get caught up in what everybody else is thinking. And people who have been politically active or had political points of view at a certain time in their lives, we just sort of habitually keep repeating those things without really stopping deeply to ask, does this really match the principles of self-realization as I understand them? Is this a well thought out, well considered response, or is this just a habitual response because this is what I've always thought? I can't think of a good example at the moment, but so many times with Swamiji, I would just respond with what I had always thought, and kindly and patiently, but definitely, Swami would lead me through a deeper thought process until I was able to consider whether or not that really was a true idea or not. And in a very important way, learn to think clearly, but also learn to be more in tune with our teachings in my responses instead of just randomly picking up ideas that sound good, which is sort of what this was all about. Okay, so needless to say, it never happened. Now, we come to a very long letter to one individual in which Swami tries very hard to help this person understand some qualities about himself. I have no idea who this one is, so I can't give any backstory to it. The summary of this letter is, no matter how others treat you, love. It's written in January of 1992. Apparently someone, I believe they're leaving Ananda because they really felt that the community has let them down. It could be that the person stays, but I have a feeling that the person says, you have, yes, this person has left Ananda, and they're leaving because they feel that the community, they came with an open-hearted expectation of being treated in a certain way, and Ananda, in fact, has treated them very badly, and as a consequence, they're leaving. So what Swami, this whole letter is about, as you'll see, is Swami and he's trying very hard and in a pretty blunt way, trying to help this person understand that the problem is actually with him. And it's his fundamental attitudes that attracted to him the negative experiences he had. And merely leaving Ananda is not going to in any way bring him anything he wants unless he deals with his own fundamental issues. And if I wish I knew who this person was, because then I could be more insightful, but I simply don't. So, Swami writes, your letter touched me deeply. I am so sorry you have felt unloved. For of course, love is what everyone in the world wants and needs. I am also deeply sorry that you were not treated more gently at Ananda. Now Swami goes on to give this man a lot of reasons why it happens, but merely because Swami can see how a person is also responsible for what they suffered, that in no way diminishes Swami's compassion for their suffering. And that's a very important duality that Swami was always able to hold. He could see that, the reason you're unloved is 1,000 attitudes Swami now is going to begin to list out for him. But nonetheless, he looks at this man, and this man is suffering. And that's very, very sad for Swami. And he's suffering, he believes, because he's suffering because he felt unloved at Ananda, and Ananda treated him harshly. I mean, the people of, whatever the circumstances were. And that makes Swami exceedingly sad, because he's in someone else's consciousness. And the mere fact that someone has brought their suffering onto themselves doesn't make their suffering any less real. And Swami could live in all those worlds. He wasn't cold, well, you brought it on yourself, which is how people sometimes are. No, Swami was very sympathetic. And then, out of sincere compassion, is why he goes on to try to explain to him, if you don't want to suffer in future, you're going to have to think about these qualities. But he wants the man to know, I assume it's a man, but I don't know. He wants the man to know how to avoid it. He deeply, in Swami's compassion, he wants to help him avoid this experience the next time. If Swami weren't compassionate, he wouldn't be so eager to help. So, I'm sorry that I was unable to see you before you left Ananda, which of course was probably just yet another quiver, another arrow in the quiver of being mistreated. My health was very bad at the time, and I had to conserve every ounce of my strength. I did want to see you. It grieved me to disappoint you. The SRF lawsuit was filed against us in July of 1990. And from that point until into 94, it was just an all-out effort to defend ourselves. By 1994, basically almost all the issues were decided in Ananda's favor, even though it went on for another 10 years. But Swami's health was exceedingly poor. And at the same time, he had to be at the lead of that legal effort. So it was a terrible time for Swamiji. And it was also Rosanna, it was a disaster for Swami's marriage as well. So Rosanna was totally upset, and because the energy of the SRF lawsuit was so ugly, it was sort of the last straw in her feeling that the energy of Ananda was incompatible with her own spirit. And eventually she went back to Italy. The energy of Ananda was just too, there was just too much fighting. There was fighting in the sense of there were too many battles that had to be engaged in, and the SRF lawsuit was the culminating force. So through all of that, this poor man wanted an opportunity to talk to Swami, and it just couldn't be done. And I did want to see you. It grieved me to disappoint you. I am going to direct my words now, Swami says, not to your emotional needs. Swami's already given attention to that. But to certain blocks in you that have prevented you from fulfilling those needs. I hope you will take the rest of this letter in the spirit with which I write it, which is with love and a sincere desire for your welfare. After all, anytime any of us suffers in life, our greatest need is to discriminate and to see what it is in ourselves that has attracted such suffering to us. We may be able to change the way a certain few others treat us. When, however, it comes to changing the behavior of numerous others, the obvious thing is to try to change those aspects in ourselves which seem to be attracting this repeated treatment. Such a simple, straightforward way of saying it. Whenever we suffer, we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening to me? And when we suffer repeatedly in the same way, we can't just keep trying to get everybody to be different. And yet, unless we're very attentive, we can find ourselves doing that. What is it in me that keeps attracting this? This is what Swami's trying to get him to say. If, as an illustration, someone has the unpleasant habit of sprinkling us with water whenever we must pass under his window, we will naturally do what we can to break him of this objectionable practice. When it comes to something more universal, however, like the rainfall, the only sensible thing to do is use an umbrella. So he's trying to talk about the individual exception and then the all-pervasive experience. What I'm saying doesn't exculpate any of us at Ananda from your charges. If I or others here have behaved unlovingly towards you, it behooves us to change our behavior. For even if this unlovingness were directed only towards you, it would indicate a test that we had failed to pass. That means, look at Swami, look how incredibly fair he is. You know, if we have behaved badly, I take responsibility for that. Even if, as he will imply, you brought it on yourself, it doesn't make us blameless for not rising above whatever you were putting out to be who we really ought to be. And so he makes that point clear. But it's rainfall, and so we have to think about what the umbrella should be. I could even leave matters there with an acceptance of blame and a plea for forgiveness. I might well do so if I didn't feel your sincere desire for love and understanding. If I can give you true understanding as exposed to mere acceptance, I believe I will show friendship for you on a much deeper level. That, therefore, is what I feel I should do. That's a very interesting point Swami's making, because he's also this person, and I keep calling it a man, but I have no reason for saying that. This person has some sincere desire to grow that Swami feels, and some level of receptivity to Swami's consciousness, or else Swami wouldn't have bothered. Swamiji doesn't calculate. He responds intuitively to what he should do, and at this point, at any point in his incarnation, he doesn't stop to analyze his intuition, he just trusts it. So he felt to write this man a letter because he feels he sincerely wants to understand. Because Swami easily could have, just as he said, he could have just ended it right there. If we were unloving to you, that we're to blame. And we're very sorry about that. And that's it. That could have just stopped. But he says, I think you really want something more from me, so I'm going to do it. This is why it's called strong medicine. And it's interesting because Swami did not write letters of this type unsolicited that often. He only wrote them when he felt called by God to do so. Sometimes he wrote them and didn't send them. But sometimes the thought form would reach a person anyway. In this case, he sent it. One of the problems we all face in life is the fact that each of us stands to a great extent behind the scenes in the theatrical pieces we present to others on life's stage. We don't get to see ourselves from the point of view of the audience. Oh, that's just so beautifully put, isn't it? We're here. We're just doing it. We don't see what others see. I can't tell you how many times, both with other people and with myself, when I really understood how it came across. It's like I just never knew how it came across. It made sense to me, and I thought it was okay. And sometimes when I see other people doing things in a sweet, sort of God's eye view of it, I think to myself, whatever makes them think that that's a good idea? I mean, I'm not even talking about my friends. Sometimes I'll see older women who used to be very beautiful and sexy, and now they're a little past their expiration date for that kind of a look, but they're still totally committed to it. And I sometimes I see extreme examples of that, and I think to myself, I wonder what makes them think that's a good idea. Just like, what is it that they think they're doing that they can't see it from the front? But that is the problem, that we're here. We can't see it as the audience sees it. So you probably are not aware of the image you project to others. It is one, forgive me for being frank, I am really trying to help you, of criticism, fault-finding, judgment, and a lack of willingness to commit yourself to anyone. Well, Swami says, maybe you don't realize it, but this is how you come across. You're critical, you're fault-finding, you're not willing to commit. You write me that you've always wanted love. Well, the way to draw love from others is to love them, not in return, but first and freely. It isn't enough merely to love them secretly in the depths of one's being. One must express that love outwardly too, by serving them and by giving to them. The greatest gift one should concentrate on giving them is happiness. Isn't that a beautiful way? You must love people, and then Swami's quick to say, not in return, but first. You must love first and freely. And then you must try to help other people to be happy. You know, the greatest gift you can give them is happiness. Serve them, Swami says. I mean, think about this, because many people in the world feel that the world is not loving them the way they want to be loved. But are you loving others the way you want them to love you? Are you waiting for people to come to you? Serve them, love them, not in return, but first. You say that you did give of yourself to various people here. Well, if you gave and they failed to show proper gratitude in return, that is their loss far more than yours. They deserve your compassion, therefore, not your condemnation. So see, there is also that. I loved you, but you didn't love me. You're a terrible person. Well, in fact, Swami's saying maybe they were selfish. Maybe they really, maybe they were wrong in not responding to you. But that just speaks of their limitations. Why condemn them? Then your love is so conditional. Swami hasn't said that yet, but that's what he means. To develop the kind of magnetism which draws love from others, we must love them first, unconditionally, even when they hurt us. For mind you, the law of life is very exact. When we give love, even if that love is misunderstood by certain others, it must return to us eventually 100-fold, if not from those people, then through other channels. Now that's quite a promise, isn't it? Swami says the divine law is exact. If we give love unconditionally, we must love them first unconditionally, even when they hurt us. For when we give love, even if that love is misunderstood, it must return to us eventually 100-fold. That's really worth just meditating on that. If not from those people, then from other channels. Our job then is to love, no matter how others treat us. If we do so, we cannot but receive love in return, if not from those to whom we have expressed it, then from countless others. There is no way for this law to be controverted. That's a magnificent promise. It's just a magnificent promise. I have observed another law of life, equally ineluctable. The more we think in terms of our own needs and desires, the more pain we feel. The more we think in terms of our own needs and desires, the more pain we feel. But the more we forget ourselves in the thought of others' needs, the greater the happiness we ourselves experience inside. Are these simple teachings? No. No, let me phrase it differently. These are very simple teachings. Is this an easy teaching? No. But if we find ourselves isolated and alone, and we crave love and we can't seem to win love from others, then we have to think very seriously how much I want to keep suffering. And when the effort to change is less painful than to continue as we are, that is when we step into the the battlefield, step onto the battlefield and begin to try to cooperate with divine law instead of railing against it. That's what Swami's suggesting here. Because the law cannot be controverted. Your thoughts, Swami says, for as long as I've known you, have shown themselves to be directed inward toward your own needs. That's a very simple statement. As long as I've known you, your thoughts are directed inward toward your own needs, not outward toward what you might give to others. I know this goes directly counter to what you've written about the many services you've rendered others. Well, none of us is purely one thing or another, purely selfish, for example, or purely unselfish. I don't question the kindnesses you've done others. Ask yourself, however, why is it that the lingering impression other people have of you is one of self-involvement, of self-preoccupation? Even those who have worked with you seem prone to think of you as someone who wants to prove the merits of his system over other systems, rather than as one who wants generously to help them to unfold their own inner talents. When I was 18, just before I turned 19, and I got the book about Vivekananda that introduced me to self-realization, of the 3 or 4 things that completely burned into my brain and changed my direction in life forever. One of them was, don't think of yourself and you'll be happy. I was just like, I always thought the way to be happy, and because I was a pretty nice and a pretty generous person, and I was really a very giving person, and so it wasn't like I was isolated and alone by any means, but always a part of me was thinking about my own position in everything. I was always trying to make sure that I maximized my own fun. Fortunately, my fun was fairly high-minded, so it didn't come out really terrible, but my mind was always on myself. And self-concern has been a theme throughout my life, even when I got very seriously on the spiritual path. This worry about me would intrude, and every difficulty I've gotten into in my life, and there have been plenty, have always been because I was self-concerned. I wanted people to listen to me. I wanted people to do it my way. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to meet the test, that just whatever it was, me, what about me, what about me, what about me? And the happiest I've ever been in my life is when I'm not thinking about me. Just as simple as that. I mean, that was like one of the very first things I learned all those years ago, 1966, June of 1966. Don't think about yourself and you'll be happy. And here Swami is saying exactly the same thing. But the impression Swami is saying to this man, and as long as I've known you, your thoughts revolve around your own needs and your own desires, rather than, oh, how can I give? How can I help? How can I serve? So, I think it all comes from a feeling of deep insecurity in yourself, which of course it almost always does. You feel shy of expressing love to others, or generosity, or concern, for fear of being rejected by them. There you have it, don't you? It's like you want to be giving, but there's this great fear that if I extend myself to people, what if they don't like me? So the generosity gets eaten up by the self-concern. Been there, know that story. It's a terrible trap, and it's a big project to get out of it, but there's no happiness without getting out of it. The trouble is that insecurity is self-perpetuating. By withholding the expression of your heart's natural love for others, you make them feel insecure in your presence, unsure of what you really think of them, doubtful whether behind the aura of aloofness that you project, you're not merely judging them unkindly, no matter what they might do to show you friendship. So you see what happens? It becomes, they can't respond to you generously because you're so worried about yourself and being so self-protective that doesn't come across. People then tend to project on you their own insecurity and assume that aloof attitude is a judgmental one. And then it just goes on and on and on and on. This must be what and Swami named someone with a blank. That must be what some person meant when he described you as he did. So apparently in the letter there was some statement about so-and-so said I was this kind of person as an example of how terrible he'd been treated at Ananda. That was an unfortunate thing to say, and an even more unfortunate thing for anyone to have repeated, whether to you or anyone else. So Swami says it's too bad that such a condemnation, it was obviously critical, was spoken. Yet that person is truly one of the least judgmental people I know. If then he said such a thing, it can only have been with reference to the tendency many have observed in you to want something from them without giving to them in return. So you see how incredibly fair-minded Swami is. First he concedes, yes, whatever was spoken about him was awful, and apparently, probably, it sounds to me like whoever this person is said something awful about this other man, and then that somebody carried it and said it. So-and-so says that you're terrible. I'm sure that the original person who made this statement was horrified that it was delivered directly. And so Swami says, yeah, it was bad that it was ever spoken, and it was terrible that somebody took it upon themselves to repeat it. It's just, when you're in a leadership position, that's just a nightmare. When you say something and then somebody else uses your name to throw it at someone else, when you would never have done that yourself. But that's what happened. So Swami says, no, that wasn't a good situation. However, the person who made that statement, Swami says, one of the most charitable, least judgmental people I know. Therefore, he must have really been seeing something in you, because he was not one who would project such a thought. I mean, Swami doesn't explain all of that, but that's obvious. In other words, perhaps you should take it seriously. Instead of just reacting, how dare you call me like this, he should say, goodness, I wonder why he said that about me. This is the same question, like, we can always react to what happens to us. We have many choices about how to react and respond to what happens to us. If consistently bad things happen, or somebody says something that's really horrifying to us, we can become angry that they dared to do it, or whatever. We're angry that they're not responding, or we can actually ask, why does this keep happening to me? What am I projecting? So then Swami goes on to say, the way out of the trap of emotional insecurity is to be impersonal in the love we give others. We must learn to love them not for themselves individually, but because we love God and God's manifestation in them. Again, the trick here also is to stop thinking of the impression you make on others and to concentrate on their emotional needs, on how you might be able to help them to fulfill those needs. Being impersonal means that it's not always, I like you, I don't like you, maybe you'll like me, I like you a little bit, I'm going to show you I like you a little bit, then maybe you'll like me a lot. Just always just running this personality game. It's more like everyone is a child of God. I am a child of God. I'm here to serve. That word impersonal is it's very funny, because I heard it from Swami for many years and I never liked it, and now I've grown to love it, because I didn't understand what it meant. It means to take the personality issue and the unique I like, I don't like out of the equation. Just as Swami said, I love God. God is manifested in everyone. Everyone I see is a child of God. Let me try to be his instrument. And it's natural to have an affinity with certain people. Certain people have more attractive magnetism than others. It's not like we're trying to become inhuman. We have karmic ties with other people. It's not like we can't differentiate among the mass and have our special kindred spirits. But in our overall attitude, especially when we're having difficulty connecting at all, just there you are, how can I help you? And instead of evaluating, you're a good person, you're a bad person, you have these qualities and you have these faults and you should behave to me like this, you're just, there you are, how can I help you? What can I do to help you? Just have that in the back of your mind all the time. What can I do to help you? My college friend, Rod Brown, told me that he had been preoccupied in high school with what others thought of him. His mother wisely told him once, "Rod, they're much too concerned about what you think of them to devote so much energy to what they think of you." I remember when I was 18 years old and I went to Stanford University as a freshman, and they had this system there, which was probably a good idea, that all the freshmen came a week early, and then we would get oriented to the campus before school started. And there were a few older students who were sort of the dorm supervisors and advisors in certain ways. But almost everyone on campus was 18 years old and there for the first time. We were all equally scared to death, is basically how I would put it. And what happened was, and this is a very vivid memory to me, we kind of went into social gridlock because everybody was so worried about himself or herself and so nervous about, being misunderstood or not liked or just doing something wrong that it was gridlock. We were all just absolutely stuck. And I watched it for about and there was nobody older to prime the pump. There was just us like this. And I made a conscious decision after about 2 days. I thought, somebody has to do something. So I was just as insecure as everyone else, but I pretended that I wasn't. And I mean, I'm slightly exaggerating the situation, but not by much. And I just began to be, and I'm not, despite what you may see, I'm not actually an extrovert. I do this because it's required of me, and I'm very comfortable in it. But when I'm left to my own devices, I'm not actually extroverted. It's more like, well, let me phrase it differently. I do whatever is needed of me. And in that time, I needed to become suddenly a very confident extrovert, even though I was actually a fairly insecure introvert. In reality, I became a very confident extrovert. I immediately made several friends, one of whom is still a very good friend of mine. And just like, at least in my little immediate circle, we all began to move. And I wasn't less frightened than anybody else. I just knew that I had to stop thinking about my fear. I had to think of something else. It's very, excuse me, I think I swallowed a feather. I saw like a feather float by. There's a Reader's Digest joke not joke, but true story that I absolutely love. There was a pastor who was giving an outdoor service, and there were a number of flying insects around, and all of a sudden he began to cough and cough, just as I'm doing, cough and cough, and finally he was okay, and the minister said, "I am pleased to announce that after overcoming great obstacles, a gnat has just entered the ministry." Okay, so it was just so silly. I've always loved that. Okay, let's see now where we were. Oh yes, I was talking about freshmen in college. It's very interesting because there's a few vivid memories that I've had in my life, and I think all of them were serious lessons, very serious lessons. Those are the ones that I still remember. I mean, from when I was 2, from when I was 4, but a few memories are there that were just experiences, but the ones that are really vivid in my mind were very important lessons, like this one. Most of my brief college career is just gone from my head. It just doesn't, I have a vision, a picture here and a picture here and a person or two, but that I remember very clearly because it was real. It was something real happened, meaning when there is an actual connection with higher consciousness. It wasn't a God experience like some other funny things that have happened to me, but it was a real understanding on a higher level that shifted something within me, and it was very important. Okay, so in fact, the person who makes the best impression on others is that generous soul who succeeds in reassuring others that they have made a good impression on him. This is so logical, isn't it? This may all seem very human and ego-boosting, but not only does it work, it also helps to diminish the grip one's own ego exerts on his mind. In other words, appreciate others, pay attention. Oh, here's the thing. Don't always have your mind on yourself. Think about others in a genuine way. I do believe you feel you are doing people a service in suggesting ways for them to improve themselves. Oh dear. I do believe you are doing people a service in suggesting ways for them to improve themselves or to improve the way they do things. Up to a point, I'm sure that if they really do desire to do better, as they ought to desire, especially if they are devotees, and thus devoted to finding ultimate perfection in God, they will be grateful to you for any good suggestions you might offer. In any suggestion one makes for the betterment of others, however, there's always the possibility of conveying the impression that one considers one's own wisdom to be superior. Look how carefully Swami says that. I'm having so much trouble reading all the words. In any suggestion one makes for the betterment of others, there is always the possibility of conveying the impression that one considers one's own wisdom to be superior. Consider this, Swami is saying. But see how gently he's dealing with this man? He's being very blunt. He's really telling him some very serious things. But, when you suggest to others, there can be a feeling of, you're putting the others down and lifting yourself up. It might happen. Even when there is no such suspicion conveyed, there is always a danger of appearing presumptuous for having stepped in with ideas of one's own in matters where it may be fairly safely assumed the conscientious person, at least, has given long and serious thought and has determined on what for him is the best course of action. Swami used to use the word meddling, just meddling in other people's business. I mean, to just walk in and act as if, well, you figured this out without taking into account that the other person may have already devoted a great deal of energy to this. And when you just walk in and tell him he's, not doing it right, he might be deeply invested in that reality. Swamiji, whenever he would give suggestions, he would always do it incrementally. He would test the water to see if there was receptivity. He would try to understand how invested a person was in the course of action they were taking before he would just wholesale suggest an alternate one. And he would adapt his input according to what he received, instead of just sailing in presumptuously and telling someone what to do when they may have spent many long hours trying to figure it out. It's very disrespectful, and it's deflating. It's disheartening. The builder who, for a variety of reasons, decides to build with wood and stucco in preference to stone is not edified by the critic who stops by and tells him it would have been better to build in stone. The least his critic might have done, the builder will think to himself, would have been to ask him why he had chosen wood and stucco in preference to stone. In other words, find out what's going on with other people. It's the same point. I come in, I've thought this through, I have a really good idea, I'm going to deliver it. But if you're not tuning into who's there, your very good suggestion might be extremely offensive, because there's no feeling of respect. There's no feeling of the other person's reality. There's just an infatuation with one's own ideas. And I understand this. I become infatuated with my own ideas and I blurt them out. And Swami's had to tell me on multiple occasions, goes back to the beginning. I know you mean well, but you don't understand the effect that it has. You're not watching it from the audience's point of view. I just sail in with my own enthusiasm for this idea without doing what Swami does, which is trying to feel out the situation first with great respect. What are you planning? Just what Swami says. What are you planning? Why are you thinking that? Explain to me, how you're seeing this. And then you can feel, for one thing, they may already have thought of what you have, or they may have already considered it and rejected it for a very good reason, or you may completely misunderstand the context. So your brilliant idea turns out not to be so brilliant at all, but just annoying. All of these are very important things. Then Swami says, I'm dealing with deep-seated aspects of your nature. I know you can't change them overnight, even if you think my suggestions are good. But I ask you, for your own sake, do try. Once you succeed in changing yourself in these respects, even to a minor degree, you'll find an amazing change in the way others treat you. For what we receive from others is always a reflection of what we first project outward towards them. This also is a promise from God that we have to take very seriously. Because you see, once we become sincere in our desire to live according to high principles, what we do is we step off the bank of ego and we step into the river of grace. And even if we're just a horrible person, and even if these are very deep-seated tendencies and these are very hard to overcome, as long as we're egoically determined like this, then God just has to wait. But as soon as we really accept that I'm really going to try, and of course it's a subtle thing because we can say I am trying, but there's a certain point at which that effort is met with the divine force, and all of a sudden we're swimming with the current. And when that, it's a karmic tipping point. That's what I have to say. There's a karmic tipping point. So it isn't just like Swami said, even if you think my suggestions are good, you're not going to be able to do this overnight. And so we might try, and it's not working. And if we just give up and revert back to our old habits, then we're right. It's not working. But if we persevere, because we have become convinced that the effort to change myself is less painful than continuing as I was, there's a certain time when we hit the karmic tipping point. And then all of a sudden, whatever karma has brought us to this point of suffering has finally been balanced by that suffering, and our good intentions suddenly have just a hair's width more power. And then all of a sudden, the power of grace begins to flow. If you can change yourself even to a minor degree, you'll be impressed by what response you get. So then Swami ends, I pray that you will not take offense at my words. They are offered to you from a sincere desire to help you find the happiness and kindness that you so much want in life, and to which you, as a child of God, are forever entitled in Master's love. Well, this section is living up to its name, isn't it? Strong medicine. And there's more to come. But next week we're skipping, so we'll see you the week after. God bless.